Well, welcome to Malachi chapter 3, second to last chapter in the entire Old Testament. We're almost done, but what some wonderful things we get to learn today. So, in continuing with the theme in Malachi of this idea of marriage counseling, this chapter is going to be a more about what is God going to do to help his sons out, to help his family out, basically. So some really good things we get to learn. A lot of like latter-day prophecy type ideas are going to come forward from this. A lot of people see this chapter as latter-day prophecy fulfilled. In fact, for LDS members as well, it's important to remember also that in the story of Moroni, the angel Moroni appearing to Joseph Smith in Joseph's bedroom, one of the things that Moroni does is he quotes in the entirety Malachi chapter 3 and chapter 4 in that vision. Remember, Moroni shows up, I think, like 3 times in there during that same night, shows up 3 times, and he's going to quote Malachi 3 and 4 in those times, talking about this is about to be fulfilled. This is ready. We got to get going, Joseph. Come on. So think about those as we go through this chapter also. Verse 1, behold, I will send my messenger, and he shall prepare the way before me. And the Lord whom ye seek shall suddenly come to his temple, even the messenger of the covenant, whom ye delight in. Behold, he shall come, saith the Lord of hosts. Now, if we look at this, this is talking about the spirit of Elijah, okay? There is a messenger that will come and prepare the way of the Lord, and then the Lord will come, basically deliver the message. This is what John the Baptist did for Christ in the New Testament times. This is what basically a prophet does as well when declaring God to the people, is prepare the people to meet God. This is what Moses was trying to do. He was trying to prepare the people so that they could stand in the presence of God again, and they didn't want it. They wanted Moses to be the intermediary for them. So in a way, this is that same idea like Joseph Smith being the messenger that will prepare the world for the second coming of Christ, basically is how LDS philosophy would look at this verse. So, in fact, the teachings of Prophet Joseph Smith, he said, the spirit of Elias is to prepare the way for a greater revelation of God, which is the priesthood of Elias, or the priesthood that Aaron was ordained unto. And when God sends a man into the world to prepare for a greater work, holding the keys of the power of Elias, it was called the doctrine of Elias, even from the early ages of the world. So that's that same idea of this messenger coming to prepare the way of God to bring more light for the people. Verse 2, he goes on and says here, but who may abide the day of his coming? And who shall stand when he appeareth? For he is like a refiner's fire and a fuller's soap. Now, this is an important one to think about. Okay, his coming is signified by an earthquake. Remember that when the Mount of Olives splits? We talked about that in Zechariah. So you can think of this as who can stand the shaking of the earth. Basically, who could stand the spiritual shaking of your faith at those moments before Christ comes? Okay, who can abide the day of his coming? Who shall stand when he appeareth? So when Christ comes, are you going to be happy he's coming? He's there like, yay, I'm so glad you're here. It's exciting. Or are you going to go, oh, crap, I got a lot of stuff to delete off my Facebook page, or I've got a lot of emails I need to take back from people, or I need to go apologize to a bunch of people before I can talk to Christ. Is it going to be a good day or a bad day for you when Christ comes? That's kind of that idea, because he's going to be a refiner's fire and a fuller's soap. He's going to come to purify and clean. The people that can withstand that cleanliness and the purification will do fine. The people who have sins, they haven't repented of, they haven't dealt with it, are not going to be fine. Basically, a big part of the idea of keeping the commandments of God is not only a test for us, but it prepares our spirit and thus our body to be worthy to withstand the coming of Christ. So this is an important thing to think about, because we're going to get into another concept of this in the New Testament times. In the 1800s, there was a man who believed in an idea called the rapture. Yes, I said 1800s. The concept of rapture is about 200 years old, and that's it. The concept of rapture did not exist before the 1800s. So that's a bit of a blow. And when we get into, I believe it's in Thessalonians that some of the scriptures are used to justify the rapture. We're going to talk about that in the New Testament in more detail. But realize that at the coming of Christ, the wicked are going to be destroyed. The righteous are going to be left. So when we look at this idea in the New Testament, we realize the rapture isn't about the righteous being taken off the earth and the rest being left for the coming of Christ. It's that the wicked will be destroyed off the earth. The righteous will be left to accept the coming of Christ, basically. And so now you're probably going to say, wait, Curtis, but what about coming down in the clouds and all that stuff? We're going to have to wait till I get to Thessalonians, and we'll talk more about that. But there's something important to look at. If you want to do some Google searches and look it up, is the rapture really true? You can look it up and do some more studies right now. But we're realizing that the rapture is a interpretation that existed in the 1800s and still exists today. Didn't exist before the 1800s. And just like Malachi 3 is talking about, who will survive the day of the coming of Christ? It's not the wicked that survive. The wicked will be destroyed. They'll be taken off the earth. The righteous will be left. That's basically what he's saying here. In fact, Joseph Fielding Smith made the comment in his book, Doctrines of Salvation, when Christ comes the second time, it will be in the clouds of heaven, and it shall be the day of vengeance against the ungodly, when those who have loved wickedness and have been guilty of transgression and rebellion against the laws of God will be destroyed. All during the ministry of Christ, wickedness ruled and seemed to prevail. But when he comes in the clouds of glory, as it is declared in this message of Malachi to the world, and which was said by Moroni to be near at hand, then Christ will appear as the refiner and purifier of both man and beast, and all that pertains to this earth, for the earth itself shall undergo a change and receive its former paradisical glory. Remember, this chapter was told 3 times to Joseph Smith by Angel Moroni in that visitation that lasted all night. So think about that, okay, as we go through this. So verse 3, and he shall sit as a refiner and a purifier of silver, and he shall purify the sons of Levi, priesthood holders, and purge them as gold and silver, that they may offer unto the Lord an offering in righteousness. So there's going to be challenges and problems to really help the priesthood to say, am I really believing this with my heart or not? So Abraham 3:25, that's the whole point of this world, to see if we will keep the commandments of God or not. Are we going to be sincere and honest and have integrity, or are we going to just act like we believe in God, basically? In fact, Joseph Smith made a comment about this too. He says, it is generally supposed that sacrifice was entirely done away when the great sacrifice, i.e. the sacrifice of the Lord Jesus, was offered up, and that there will be no necessity for the ordinance of sacrifice in the future. But those who assert this are certainly not acquainted with the duties, privileges, and the authority of the priesthood or the prophets. The offering of sacrifice has ever been connected and forms a part of the duties of the priesthood. It began with the priesthood and will be continued until after the coming of Christ from generation to generation. We frequently have made of the offerings of sacrifice by the servants of the Most High in ancient days, prior to the law of Moses, which ordinances will be continued when the priesthood is restored with all its authority, power, and blessings. These sacrifices, as well as every ordinance belonging to the priesthood, will, when the temple of the Lord shall be built, and the sons of Levi be purified, be fully restored and attended to in all their powers, ramifications, and blessings. This ever did and ever will exist when the powers of the Melchizedek priesthood are sufficiently manifest. Else how can the restitution of all things spoken of by the holy prophets be brought to pass? It is not to be understood that the law of Moses will be established again with all its rites and variety of ceremonies. This has never been spoken of by the prophets, but those things which existed prior to Moses' day, namely sacrifice, will be continued. So the tribe of Levi, we can look at this from a literal standpoint. The rightful heirs of Aaronic priesthood, of the sacrifices, will be purified. They will be holy, prepared to live the commandments of God, ready to do things, repenting of their own sins, those kinds of things, worthy to exercise the priesthood, to offer a final sacrifice to God, basically. Verse 4, then shall the offering of Judah and Jerusalem be pleasant unto the Lord, as in the days of old, and as in former years. And I will come near to you to judgment, and I will be a swift witness against the sorcerers, and against the adulterers, and against false swearers, and against those that oppress the hireling in his wages, the widow and the fatherless, and that turn aside the stranger from his right. And fear not me, saith the Lord of hosts. So Christ, now this is a change again, okay? Christ will be a lawyer for the defense to those who have defended him and his people. Think of a court scene now. We talked about most of Malachi is like a arbitration type, marriage counseling type idea. Now we're going to think more in a court case here. Christ will be the defense for those who defended him, who support him. He will also be a lawyer of prosecution against those who have persecuted him and his people. So those he's helping, he'll be a lawyer to help them in their cause, like the atonement. That's what the atonement is going to do, is those who have repented and have let Christ into their life, he will advocate for them with the Father, and they will be able to go to heaven, basically. If they haven't let Christ into their life and kept his commandments and done his things, then he's going to say, nope, the law says, no, you didn't follow what I said, you're out. And he'll be the dividing line for the people, basically. Verse 6, in fact, he says here, for I am the Lord, I change not. Therefore, ye sons of Jacob are not consumed. Even from the days of your fathers, ye are gone away from mine ordinances, and have not kept them. So this is the history. You guys it's been generations that you have gone away. You've lived a false religion. You have acted religious, but aren't truly religious, basically. Return unto me, and I will return unto you, saith the Lord of hosts. Now here's, again, the marriage counseling's back. But ye said, wherein shall we return? So they're going, we didn't really leave you. What are you talking about? Okay, we never left. Verse 8 is now the evidence against them. Will a man rob God? Yet ye have robbed me. But ye say, wherein have we robbed thee? In tithes and offerings. So this is the problem. In fact, verse 9, it says, ye are cursed with a curse, for ye have robbed me, even this whole nation. So they have not been truly living their religion. They have been acting religious, but not truly believing it inside. They didn't follow it the proper way. That's the problem they've had. This is the theme. If you watched all our videos, this is such a theme we see through all the Old Testament. Hollow religion is what God is teaching against. He's not so much preaching against the heathen as he is preaching against hollow religion. He wants true worship, basically. In fact, LeGrand Richards had a comment that he made about this in a General Conference report, April 1939. He said, in addition to giving ourselves and giving our services, the Lord has asked us to give of our means and our substance. We have men in the church who give their time. They will go when they are asked to preach. They will perform a public duty, but it is hard to do the little duty that is seen in secret by them and God alone in their presiding officers. And so we are asked to contribute our tithes and offerings, not only because the church needs money to build itself, for before there was an organization of the church, God introduced the principle of sacrifice in order that his servants and his children might be tested, that they should bring the best of their lands and of their herds. They were burned upon the altar of sacrifice, but the giving sanctified the souls of those who gave. The prophet Malachi declared that in the last days the Lord should send his messenger to prepare the way before him, and he called upon Israel, and I interpret that to mean latter-day Israel, to return unto him, and promised that he would return unto them. And they said, wherein shall we return unto thee? And he said, in your tithes and offerings, for ye have robbed me, even this whole nation. Bring ye all the tithes into the storehouse, that there may be meat in mine house. And I want to say to you, my brothers and sisters, that we need the tithes of the saints in order that the kingdom might go on, for it shall be builded just as rapidly as the faith of the saints can build it. And it is retarded when there is a lack of faith. So again, God doesn't need our money. We need to give it. We need to be willing to sacrifice our best. That's important, okay? So as he says here in verse 10, bring ye all the tithes into the storehouse, that there may be meat in my house. And prove me now herewith, saith the Lord of hosts, if I will not open you the windows of heaven and pour you out a blessing, that there shall not be room enough to receive it. So this is the beauty to look at this. This is what God does with the sacrifices we offer to him, okay? When we bring him the tithes, it is put in a storehouse and then used to help other people out, basically. He gives his meat to the poor and hungry, those that need it. He gives to help others. So that's what tithing and fast offerings and those things are for, the offerings, basically. Bless the lives of others. That's the bishop's storehouse. That is temples blessing the lives of others spiritually. There's lots of opportunities where that is used to benefit other people. Now, paying tithing is more than a test for us to prove that God is there and is helping us than it is being tested. So realize when you do this, this is again about, he's laying a challenge down. Pay your tithing and prove if I do not give you blessings. Now realize results takes time to measure, okay? You can't just, hey, I'm going to write a tithing check. I'm going to give a big fast offering and, oh my gosh, suddenly, yay, I've got all this bountiful stuff. It's amazing. No, it's not going to happen that fast. Now, granted, sometimes it does. There are stories of people that like they pay their tithing and the next day they suddenly get a check in the mail for somebody else. They won a prize or some rich uncle died or whatever, Sometimes that does happen. Sometimes it comes in different ways. But when you look back over time, it will be undeniable that God has been helping you in your life. And then you'll say, yes, that's why I'm paying my tithing. That's why I want to keep that going. I can't afford not to pay my tithing because I want those blessings of God in my life. That's the B, the extra bonus that God brings into our life when we keep his commandments. Now, also with this, verse 11 gives us even more. He says, and I will rebuke the devourer for your sakes. He shall not destroy the fruits of your ground, neither shall your vine cast her fruit before the time in the field, saith the Lord of hosts. So this is, again, so if you think of the context, they lived off of what they could grow back then. We don't today. Okay, so today it's all about money, it's jobs, it's working, it's those things. So paying your tithing can help you keep your job longer, maybe avoid layoffs, maybe get a new, better job than what you have now. And it will come in the proper time. Like he says there, neither shall your vine cast her fruit before the time. So he's not saying your fruit's not going to go bad. He's saying it's not going to go bad in the proper time, because fruit turning ripe too early is going to be bad. So you can't pay your tithing and suddenly expect all your fruit to be ripe immediately. It's in the proper time. It'll be taken care of. That's important to always remember. Results takes time to measure. Now verse 12, and all nations shall call you blessed, for ye shall be a delightsome land, saith the Lord of hosts. When the community collectively is paying their tithing and doing things, the people will be seen as delightsome. Like, oh, you guys are great. There's like amazing stuff you're doing. Verse 13, your words have been stout against me, saith the Lord. Yet ye say, what have we spoken so much against thee? So there we go again. Here's the next iteration of this back and forth we've seen through the whole book of Malachi, the marriage counseling. The Lord is saying, you guys have been negative against me. And they're going, when have we been negative against you? Verse 14, ye have said, it is vain to serve God. And what profit is it that we have kept his ordinance, and that we have walked mournfully before the Lord of hosts? God in verse 14 is pointing out what they've been thinking. They're like, why are we really doing this? Why are we offering to God? I mean, this isn't profiting me. I could be out making more money, except I'm here in the temple doing these sacrifices for people. I'm giving up my best for God. Why? Why am I really doing this? That's where they've been murmuring basically against God. So verse 15, and now we call the proud happy. Yea, they that work wickedness are set up. Yea, they that tempt God are even delivered. So now this is the other side of this going, the people that do wicked seem to be prospering. So it's not just people going, why am I really, I'm going to question my faith, basically. Why am I really doing this? This is also the people the followers of God saying, it appears like disobeying the commandments is actually doing better for people than obeying them. It feels like wickedness is prospering, basically. So we're going to see that argument from both sides right there between 14 and 15. So verse 16, he goes on, he says, and then they that feared the Lord spake often one to another. So the feared the Lord, remember, respected. And the Lord hearkened and heard it, and a book of remembrance was written before him for them that feared the Lord, or respected the Lord, and that thought upon his name. So the people who kept the commandments were kept in a book of remembrance. Okay, this is an important thing for us to look at now. Bruce R. McConkie said in his book Mormon Doctrine, he talked about this. He said, Adam kept a written account of his faithful descendants in which he recorded their faith and works, their righteousness and devotion, their revelations and visions, and their adherence to the revealed plan of salvation. To signify the importance of honoring our worthy ancestors and of hearkening to the great truths revealed to them, Adam called his record a book of remembrance. It was prepared according to the pattern given by the finger of God. We can see this in the book of Moses, chapter 6. Similar records have been kept by the saints in all ages. Matthew chapter 3, 3 Nephi 24 are good examples of that. Many of our present scriptures have come down to us because they were first written by prophets who were following Adam's pattern of keeping a book of remembrance. The church keeps similar records today. Section 85 of the Doctrine and Covenants talks about that, and urges its members to keep their own personal and family books of remembrance. So there is a book in heaven that will be judged, the book of life. We talked about that. There's the book of remembrance written before everybody. This is also church records of ordinances, genealogical records, family scriptures, all those things as well, kind of tie in loosely into this idea also. Now, verse 17, he says, and they shall be mine, saith the Lord of hosts. That's interesting that he says this, okay? In that day when I make up my jewels, and I will spare them, as a man spareth his own son that serveth him. So Blair, Van Dyke, and Kelly Ogden said, interestingly, the word jewels in this verse is a translation of the Hebrew segulia, which means valued property or possession, or royal treasure. As justice cannot be averted for rebellious Israel, Malachi, like Hosea, makes a compelling case that God's mercies were still sufficient for those willing to repent. Amos through Malachi, major teachings of the 12 prophets, that was their article. So those who repented were seen as a treasure, were seen as valuable property to God. He took care of them while the rest of the wicked were destroyed, basically. And then, of course, verse 8, and then shall ye return and discern between the righteous and the wicked, between him that serveth God and him that serveth him not. So remember that we talked in chapter 2 about the valley of decision that Israel went through with Joshua. That's that same equation, and that's what it comes down to for us as well. Are you going to keep the commandments of God or not? You know them. Are you going to keep them or not? That's your choice. That's the agency we have for this life, basically. And that's what everything in our life is about. Are we going to keep the commandments of God, or are we not going to keep the commandments of God? So think about that, and we'll see you in the next chapter.